Today we're diving into one of the best Avengers animated adaptations. Yes, I'm talking about the Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes. At this point, Marvel was trying to make the most of the heroes they actually had the rights to. Big names like the X-Men and Spider-Man were off the table, so they had to work with what they had. And let's be honest, that's exactly what led to the MCU as we know it today, including the massive success of the Infinity Saga. But we're not here to talk about the movies. We're here to talk about an animated series that was basically a preview of what Marvel would eventually become. Marvel had already made other animated shows before this one, but none had the same level of animation quality and storytelling. The story takes off with Iron Man taking on Hydra's foot soldiers. If you're not familiar, Hydra is a secret organization that survived World War II and is always scheming to take over the world. This time, they're after Stark's technology, but clearly they have no idea who they're messing with. Iron Man makes sure to teach them a lesson, taking down a whole squad using his tech. That's when S.H.I.E.L.D. shows up. They're a top-secret agency dedicated to protecting the world from major threats. And yeah, I know, there's nothing secret about a flying aircraft carrier that costs billions in taxpayer money, but let's roll with it. Nick Fury and his team step in to assist Stark, but he isn't exactly grateful. He tells them their help was useless. One agent, clearly offended, points a gun at Stark's helmet. Bold move, considering she's pointing a weapon at one of the most dangerous men on the planet. Fury, however, isn't so easily dismissed. He warns Stark that his tech is crucial for global security, and that if he refuses to cooperate, S.H.I.E.L.D. might have to take it by force. Then, he leaves before things can escalate, and that's when we learn something even more interesting. Fury has been trying to get his hands on Stark-level technology by working with a former Hydra ally. Because, you know, nothing suspicious about that. To be fair, this guy is locked up in the most secure prison in the world. What could possibly go wrong, right? Well, a villain with a scythe for a hand shows up, breaks him out, and just like that, Hydra has one of its top leaders back. Great job, S.H.I.E.L.D. They literally kept this guy alive, used his tech, and then let him fall right back into enemy hands. And people wonder why Stark doesn't trust them with his inventions. The villain, Baron Zemo, has the ability to steal youth from others to keep himself young. Naturally, he uses this power on Fury, leaving him with his signature scars. And yes, at this point the story is already better than some of the MCU movies. In episode 2, we get to see Thor, who has feelings for Jane Foster, a paramedic who is, of course, stunning. But don't get too invested in their romance. It doesn't get much screen time. In this version, Thor can return to Asgard whenever he wants through the Bifrost, and that's exactly what he does. But when he gets there, he finds Loki invading Asgard with an army of frost giants. Thor, being Thor, manages to capture Loki and delivers him to Odin. But Odin isn't thrilled. He doesn't like that Thor is spending so much time on Earth while Asgard is left vulnerable. As punishment, Odin banishes Loki to the realm of silence. But of course, Loki already has an escape plan in place, and that's just the beginning of his grand scheme.
Let me worry about my stepbrother.
In the third episode, we meet Bruce Banner, who looks like a homeless guy and is on the run from literally everyone who wants a piece of the Hulk's power. One of the most persistent pursuers is General Ross, who's basically the worst father-in-law imaginable. So much so that instead of just disliking his potential son-in-law, he actively hunts down people affected by radiation. To take down the Hulk, they send Natasha and Hawkeye after him. At first, the Hulk gets hit with a ton of arrows, which oddly works because it doesn't make him mad enough to fight back. And if you didn't know, Hulk's strength is directly tied to his anger. Natasha takes advantage of this moment of calm and hits him with an electric shock, neutralizing him before he can get any angrier. Hulk is then locked up in a facility where Banner's best friend works as a doctor. Supposedly, he's researching a cure for people affected by radiation. But surprise, that's a lie. His real job? Collecting blood samples from these people to create stronger mutants and soldiers. Natasha knows about this shady operation and steals a sample, secretly passing it to someone. Yep, she's an undercover agent inside the facility. Hawkeye, however, catches her in the act. He can't believe what he's seeing. Natasha, his longtime ally, betraying them? No way. Before he can expose her, reinforcements arrive, and Natasha flips the script, making it look like Hawkeye is the traitor. Now he has to run for his life while trying to clear his name. But just like she took down Hulk, Natasha also captures Hawkeye, and we have no clue what happens to him after that.
It worked. We'll need to arrange a new drop. But as far as S.H.I.E.L.D. is concerned, I just took down a traitorous double agent.
Sometime later, we get a blast from the past. Captain America himself. Back in the 1940s, he fought Nazis alongside his loyal sidekick against his arch nemesis, the Red Skull. At one point, his sidekick sacrifices himself to save Cap, and Cap ends up frozen in ice. Anyone else would have died, but thanks to the super soldier serum, which, fun fact, was originally designed to create the ultimate superior race, he survives. Then we meet Kang the Conqueror. The moment he sees Cap waking up, he realizes that this event will eventually lead to the destruction of his timeline, which could even wipe him out. So, to prevent that, he figures there's only one solution: eliminate Captain America. Later on, we're introduced to Ant-Man, though this version is different from the movies. Here it's Hank Pym, a brilliant scientist who's mastered the ability to change his size at will. He fights using insects and other unconventional methods, and alongside him is his partner and love interest, Wasp. And let me tell you, she's hands down the best character in the series. Compared to other adaptations, this show really gives proper attention to characters that often get sidelined outside the comics. Oh, and one last thing, Wasp is absolutely stunning, just putting that out there.
Yeah, boy.
The final Avenger to make an entrance? None other than T'Challa, the Black Panther. His father, the King of Wakanda, gets defeated in a battle for the throne. Not in a fair fight, but thanks to a cowardly sonic device. This leaves the throne of Wakanda, the most powerful nation on Earth, open for the taking. And stepping up to claim it is none other than the king's firstborn, T'Challa. Sometime later, Bruce Banner's worst nightmare comes true. A prison riot breaks out, exposing several people to gamma radiation, including Bruce's friend, Samson, who ends up mutating. Of all the villains set free, the most dangerous is a former scientist who once worked for S.H.I.E.L.D. on super soldier experiments. However, due to a major failure in his research, he developed incredible abilities. Fearing his growing instability, S.H.I.E.L.D. decided to lock him away where he could be kept under control. With his newfound gravitational powers, he captures Nick Fury as his first victim. The scientist asks if Fury believes in gravity, because he's looking right at it. The villain seems unbeatable. Even Thor's hammer, wielded at full power, can't damage him. He likely manipulates gravitational forces around him, making his attacks overwhelmingly powerful rather than strategic. At this point, every hero introduced so far joins forces to take down this massive threat. The only one who refuses to help is Hulk, as his friend Samson is in critical condition due to radiation exposure. In a conversation with Banner, Hulk learns that high levels of toxic exposure can have unpredictable effects on humans, sometimes leading to mutations, other times to severe illness, and in the worst cases, death. In the end, Banner strikes a deal with Hulk. If he steps up and fights as a hero, Bruce will stay out of the picture for a long time. Fueled by rage, Hulk charges toward the scientist, determined to crush his gravitational field and send him flying out of orbit. While Hulk is busy delivering this beatdown, Hank Pym and Wasp try to intervene to prevent him from leveling the entire city along with the villain. However, gravity is an overwhelming force, and they quickly find themselves outmatched. The only one who can push through sheer force of will and fury is Hulk. Even the scientist, who believed himself unstoppable, starts to panic. He barely has time to react before Hulk shows him exactly what it means to unleash pure, unfiltered rage. As Hulk immobilizes him, Thor steps in and unleashes the full power of his lightning, finally taking the villain down.
Who's strongest now?
You had the power to do anything, and you used it to put millions of lives at risk.
Pretty sad.
With the battle over, Nick Fury arrives with a full squad of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. He declares that both Hulk and Samson are fugitives, but for the sake of humanity, they should join forces and form a team. Otherwise, Fury will have no choice but to send Hulk back into captivity. Not wanting to abandon their strongest ally, the heroes agree, and just like that, the Avengers are officially formed. From this point on, they'll be spending 24/7 together, and the series does a great job of exploring how a group of larger-than-life individuals learn to live and work as a team. And let's be real, at this point, Marvel's animated series were getting dangerously close to rivaling DC's. Early on, Hulk and Thor don't exactly get along. To make things worse, a sorceress allied with Loki tricks Hulk into turning against Thor. This leads to an all-out brawl. Hulk is incredibly strong, but Thor is no pushover. He's a full-fledged Norse god, after all. Wielding Mjolnir, Thor lands devastating blows on Hulk, and the two of them end up destroying a huge chunk of a park in the process. The Wasp tries to communicate with the Hulk, but nearly gets squashed. Luckily, Hulk manages to regain control, and when he realizes he almost crushed her, he snaps out of the sorceress's influence. And honestly, I don't blame him. Wasp is stunning, and let's be real, there's no better wake-up call than that. This whole event leaves Hulk devastated. Hurting an ally is too much for him to bear. It shatters him mentally because deep down, he wants to be more rational, but when pushed to his limits, he lost control and nearly hurt his friends. And let's face it, that's what makes Hulk such a great character. Despite having limitless destructive power, he still wrestles wrestles with his own conscience. This isn't just Hulk smash. This is Hulk philosophize and suffer trademark. Meanwhile, back with the rest of the Avengers, the Sorceress captures Thor. But thanks to a well-coordinated effort between Hulk and Wasp, they manage to defeat her and her allies by relying on strategy and deception, since brute force alone wouldn't cut it. Hulk's friends comfort him, assuring him that he's not a monster. But that's not enough for Hulk. So he heads to Antarctica to reflect on his life, his pain, and his philosophy, where no one can hear him cry, except of course his own echo. But his cries end up leading him to Captain America, who, thanks to an all-natural, 100% organic super soldier serum, has managed to survive for half a century frozen in the Antarctic ice. When Cap is thawed out, he's completely disoriented and immediately attacks Thor with his shield. Turns out those super soldier enhancements are still going strong because he takes down both Thor and Ant-Man in record time, using one to knock out the other. Eventually, Cap makes his way to the city, only to realize the world has changed drastically. Once the confusion settles, he joins the Avengers just in time to face a new villain, one who storms the Avengers mansion and devours Wasp. Cap witnesses the whole thing and is horrified that he couldn't stop it. But in classic Wasp fashion, she pulls off an escape. When the monster explodes, she's still in miniaturized form, so she's barely affected by the blast. Then Cap encounters a man in purple. This guy is insanely fast, and with a flurry of sword strikes, he almost takes Cap down. His sword isn't just sharp, it's ridiculously fast. But Cap gets backup. Enter T'Challa, who steps in just long enough to turn the tide before letting Cap finish the fight against the Purple Knight. After the battle, Tony Stark shows Cap a photo of his father with Cap, as if to say, "See? We go way back." Fast forward some time, and Stark, true to form, is still growing his empire. In the process, he buys out a struggling businessman's company and immediately fires him. Ant-Man calls Stark out, reminding him that even though he doesn't build weapons anymore, he's still a pretty miserable human being for treating people so poorly and having zero business ethics. Tony's ruthlessness pushes Simon into the arms of Morlock, who transforms him into a being of pure energy and sends him on a mission of vengeance against Stark. And before taking on Tony, Simon decides to level half the city, because if you're going to hold a grudge, might as well go big. But then a pacifist hero makes him reconsider everything and seek help. But of course, Tony Stark, being Tony Stark, completely ruins it. He attacks Simon with one of his high-tech suits. Simon, however, isn't having it and tears apart a good chunk of the armor. But then, things take a turn. Simon starts feeling weak, his energy is running out, and he begins to fade away. The only way to save him? Get him to Stark's energy reactor. And in one of the rare moments where our billionaire, genius, philanthropist actually shows some humanity, he takes Simon to the reactor. But it's too late. Simon loses control of his energy. In a last-ditch effort, he tries to take Tony down with him, but it doesn't work. That's when Tony drops a bombshell. He never meant to hurt Simon. He just wanted to buy out his company. Classic Stark move. And yet, despite everything, Tony still tries to save him, but there's no time. Simon vanishes. Not because Tony wanted to protect his groundbreaking technology that could help humanity. Oh no, of course not. It's just that sacrificing himself wasn't part of the deal. So let's get this straight. Tony spends the entire episode making Simon's life miserable, lets him die in the end, and then tries to justify it with some cheap sentimental speech? Right. But wait. Simon isn't actually dead. Turns out the Enchantress teleported him away to join her squad of supervillains. Meanwhile, the Avengers are on a spaceship, heading to Wakanda to help T'Challa reclaim his throne from the cowards who overthrew his father. Thanks to this alliance, and well, the Avengers being the Avengers, T'Challa joins the team and decides it's time to open Wakanda to the outside world. The show does a great job of exploring Wakanda's human relationships, but it kinda drops the ball when it comes to showcasing the nation's wealth and insane technological advancements. With the Black Panther conflict wrapped up, we shift gears to Hawkeye, who's being hunted by Black Widow. He manages to capture her because proving his innocence is his only shot at survival, and knowing he wouldn't stand a chance in a straight-up fight, he takes her down with a specially prepared arrow. Smart move. Meanwhile, the Avengers head into a gamma radiation-infested zone where exposure is turning people into full-blown monsters. It's a crisis that needs immediate action. Of course, things get messy fast. Mutants start swarming them, but thanks to their radiation-proof suits, they're at least somewhat protected. Well, most of them. Unfortunately, Wasp's suit gets ripped, and she transforms into a terrifying monster. Yes, it's possible for her to get ugly, and she immediately turns on her own team. Oh, and fun fact, Thor, no protective gear, because he's Thor. It turns out the mastermind behind this disaster is none other than the leader, one of Hulk's biggest enemies. He's got the ability to control all these gamma-mutated creatures with his mind. And while he has an insanely powerful brain, his body is as frail as a paperclip. But the leader isn't satisfied with just turning a few prisoners into monsters. He's built a device to expand the gamma zone, which would turn a whole lot more people into mutants, including the Avengers. And sure enough, most of them get transformed into gamma-powered zombies, except for Thor. Because again, he's Thor. Also, Black Widow and Hawkeye manage to avoid the transformation, proving once again that sometimes being a regular human is the real superpower. Those who were outside the radiation's reach managed to escape. And Hawkeye? Well, he took off, leaving Black Widow behind to be consumed by the radiation. Fair enough, considering she had wrongly accused him earlier. Hawkeye eventually crosses paths with Hulk, who, of course, is also immune to this radiation. Hulk finds the whole thing hilarious and lets Banner take over, figuring he can whip up an antidote and save humanity from total annihilation. And that's exactly what happens. With his genius, Banner completely outsmarts the leader, who once again gets defeated and locked up. This just proves that the leader, in all his arrogance, never considered that the human behind Hulk might actually be the bigger intellectual threat. Later, all the villains that the Enchantress had gathered decide it's time for a full-scale attack on the Avengers, aiming to undo everything they've accomplished. Meanwhile, Thor's with Jane, but the Enchantress, who is a little too obsessed with him, captures him. Unfortunately for her, Thor isn't interested in sore losers. He's just not that into her. After a long battle, the Avengers manage to take down most of the villains, forcing the Enchantress to flee once again. In the next episode, Wasp teams up with Carol Danvers. Wasp complains that Ant-Man hasn't been giving her enough attention. Yes, you heard that right. Ant-Man is out here ignoring one of the most attractive characters in this entire show. Anyway, back to business. They're investigating an alien presence on Earth because, as if human, divine, and supernatural interference weren't enough, now aliens are getting involved too. The big question, how are these aliens spying on humanity? Could be satellites, undercover agents, or worse, they could already be living among us. Turns out, it's not that kind of infiltration. The aliens in question are from the Kree, a parasitic species that jumps from planet to planet draining resources. They're mortal enemies of the Skrulls, another species that does basically the same thing, except the Skrulls are even worse because they completely wipe out civilizations. The Kree, at least, don't destroy everything in their path. This particular Kree warrior arrives on Earth to destroy one of their own machines, a massive battle robot. The Avengers decide to help because these robots are essentially planet-clearing weapons designed to eliminate any resistance before a full-scale invasion. Since the robot is insanely powerful, all the heroes with energy-based attacks focus their firepower on it, while the others protect the Kree warrior so he can take control of the machine. But there's a catch. He says they need to wait for reinforcements. Yeah, this robot is so ridiculously strong that it could wipe out an entire civilization at Earth's tech level. But let's pause for a second. If the Kree are supposed to be the good guys, then what kind of good guys wipe out whole populations? Doesn't sound too noble, does it? Apparently this particular Kree soldier sees things differently. With Wasp's help, he manages to override the Sentinel's energy core, and in doing so, he declares that humanity is worth saving. So he decides to take the Sentinel out of Earth's atmosphere, sacrificing himself to prevent the planet's destruction. It almost costs him everything. He nearly dies in the process. Luckily, Stark and Thor swoop in at the last moment and save him, but in the end, his actions are seen as treason by his own people. Disabling the Sentinel means he's turned his back on the Kree Empire, but in the end, he is accepted as an ally of humanity and gains many friends. Though some were badly hurt, he still carries the guilt of wiping out entire civilizations and for letting Carol Danvers take too much damage. So he gives her his powers, believing she'll use them better than he ever could. After so many tragedies, Hank Pym finally makes peace with the stunning Wasp. The two share a heartfelt embrace. With all that behind them, the Avengers launch an attack on Hydra's base. Their biggest threat? Baron. At first, Hawkeye tries using his high-tech arrows against him, but they're useless. Black Widow moves in, but nothing seems to work, until she manages to hit his arrows, leaving him nearly defenseless. But then, the Baron grabs him and drains a huge chunk of his vitality. That's when Hawkeye starts to suspect his friend Natasha might not be who she says she is. But just as things look grim, she suddenly betrays the Baron, attacking him from behind and taking him down. They escape, only to find themselves in the middle of of a battlefield, Hawkeye fires an arrow at one of Hydra's villains, only to reveal her true identity as a Skrull. And just like that, we get a chilling revelation. Earth might be the next target of this ruthless race of conquerors. Meanwhile, in a less world-ending but still dramatic moment, Tony and Cap are boxing. Captain America takes this opportunity to remind Tony that without his suit, he's just a rich guy with no real combat skills. If he ever finds himself without his armor, he needs to know how to fight. Because as one of Earth's last lines of defense, he has to be ready for anything. The Avengers can't help but laugh at Tony's struggle. Then Kang arrives, and he doesn't come alone. He brings his entire army at full force. He shows the Avengers a vision of Earth's future, a future that will supposedly be destroyed because of Captain America's actions. Kang's forces are far too strong to be defeated by mere humans. So, while part of the Avengers hold off the villains, the rest focus on activating the Ultron plan, an AI designed to protect Earth from threats beyond the Avengers' capabilities. The AI is programmed only to defend humanity, never to turn against it. And since they have no choice but to fight Kang head-on, they go all in, leveling the playing field against his forces. The final piece of the puzzle? Finding Kang's main ship, the one carrying the leader himself. If they can destroy it, they'll force all of Kang's ships to leave Earth and return to the 40th century where they came from. Just one more addition to humanity's ever-growing list of enemies. This time, people from the future, both human and alien. The Avengers track down the ship and pursue it. The problem? The ship's systems are so complex that even Tony can't crack them. That's when Ultron steps in. Like our own personal ChatGPT, Ultron figures it out, sending the enemy fleet back to their own time. But just when victory seems certain, Wasp arrives with a warning. If they cut off this temporal flow, Kang's true love, who is gravely ill, will cease to exist. Now what will they choose? And so, the Avengers surrender to all that love. They decide to imprison Kang but leave his ship intact. S.H.I.E.L.D. takes over control of the ship, while the Fantastic Four are tasked with looking after Ramona, Kang's great love. After all the chaos caused by Kang, a new threat emerges. Enchantress. Having been defeated multiple times, she now seeks enough power to finally bring down the Avengers. She then uses a mysterious box to unleash an apocalyptic winter on Earth, but the Avengers manage to disable it before things get too far out of hand. As a result of the battle, they end up destroying the portal that connects Earth to Asgard, leaving Thor stuck on Earth. In the next episode, the Avengers are furious with Black Widow for betraying them. That's when she drops a bombshell. She was never actually with Hydra. She had been a double agent working for Nick Fury the whole time, and now she needs their help, because Fury has mysteriously vanished, which is just the worst possible timing since Morlock and Hydra are now fighting over the Tesseract. According to them, it has the power to grant any wish. Spoiler alert, turns out it doesn't. And just like that, the entire fight over the cube turns out to be pointless. To deal with all this chaos, S.H.I.E.L.D's second-in-command steps up to replace Fury. Her first move? Announcing that she wants the Avengers' identities to be made public. Which, is a bit of a problem, considering most of them have families and a long list of enemies. Naturally, the Avengers start questioning S.H.I.E.L.D's sudden shift in priorities. Meanwhile, Natasha and Hawkeye finally mend their friendship after she tells him the whole truth. And in a moment that fans have been waiting for, they share their first kiss in the series. Then we see Hank Pym working on Ultron, and now Ultron has a new philosophy. Humanity is inherently flawed and must be corrected. Here's my theory. Kang's ship must have given Ultron a ton of information about the future of humanity, and after analyzing it, Ultron decided, yeah, no, this species is a lost cause. So now he's basically pulling a Skynet and deciding to wipe everyone out. If ChatGPT said something like that, people would be terrified. But Hank Pym? He just sees it as a minor programming hiccup. Ultron takes control of Stark Industries and attacks Captain America and Jane Foster. Cap holds his ground and Hawkeye manages to evade Ultron's assault. But then Ultron goes all out, using every bit of his energy to strike Thor, who seems to be defeated. The only one who can still stop him? The Wasp. She's small enough to be undetectable to Ultron. Plus, Ultron was programmed with Hank Pym's emotions, so deep down he actually likes Wasp. And honestly, I don't blame him. Ultron, now stronger than ever, takes over Stark's entire facility, and even S.H.I.E.L.D's forces are useless against him. Having already crushed Kang's armies, Ultron is now in complete control. He even takes command of Stark's Iron Man suits and starts chasing Wasp with one of them, and just barely, she manages to escape Ultron's onslaught. While all of this was happening on Earth, Thor was off in paradise with the Enchantress. She used her teleportation to save him, but of course, she had her own agenda, trying to turn the God of Thunder into one of her pawns. Thor eventually returns to Earth to fight Ultron, using his incredible hammer-wielding skills skills to wear the AI down. Meanwhile, Hank Pym is working on a way to put an end to Ultron once and for all. And in the final moments, just when Ultron is about to take down Thor, Hank manages to disable him, securing the win. After this victory, the commander of S.H.I.E.L.D. immediately blames Hank for everything, because, you know, accountability is only for people who don't build homicidal robots. But let's be real, if it weren't for Ultron, they'd all be under Kang's rule by now. Suspicious behavior from S.H.I.E.L.D. if you ask me. Still, Hank is overwhelmed with guilt and decides to leave the Avengers. And yep, that also means breaking up with Wasp so she can move on. In the final episodes of the first season, we enter the last big arc. With the Avengers' help, Thor is finally able to return to Asgard. But there's a catch. Every hero gets scattered across the 9 realms. Pretty convenient for the villains, who know that when the Avengers are together, they're unstoppable. But apart, well, that's a different story. And yet, instead of taking them out one by one, the so-called Legion of Super Losers, as I like to call them, decides to fight them separately. A bold strategy. Let's see if it pays off. The Enchantress has a plan for both Asgard and Earth, and to make it work, she needs runes hidden across the 9 realms. This leads to some epic battles, like Hulk going full smash mode against one of her allies, only to get smashed right back. But the real spotlight is on Wasp, who's trying to fix this entire mess. Meanwhile, Thor makes a shocking discovery. The real leader behind the Legion of Super Losers is none other than his brother Loki, and Loki, being Loki, has some serious tricks up his sleeve. He traps Thor with unbreakable shackles, and reveals that the only reason Thor's been stuck on Earth all this time is because he has been using Odin's power to block his return to Asgard. Not only that, Loki has now taken over the most powerful realm of them all, claiming what he believes is rightfully his. And with that, we're heading into the grand finale of the season. The forces of evil are about to face off against the Valkyries, a newly determined Captain America who's finally made peace with his past, and of course Tony Stark, who's busy forging a brand new suit. Oh, and just a small detail, this armor, it's made from the same material as Thor's hammer. And let me tell you, the forging scenes are almost as epic as the classic ones from his earlier days. Almost. Because nothing, and I mean nothing, is as epic as Wasp in her tiny, ridiculously adorable battle armor. As the fight kicks off, Loki tries to use the skies to his advantage, but surprise, his attacks can't scratch Tony's new iron suit. Forced into close combat, Loki knocks Stark down, only for Hulk to jump in and land a mean punch. Thor finally gets his hammer back, goes full rage mode, and decides it's time to end this. In the end, Loki is defeated, and then, just when things couldn't get more dramatic, Odin makes a grand entrance. And this time, he's done playing around. Loki is sent straight to hell, and that's where we leave things for now. Buckle up, because the next season is bound to be even wilder. After Loki's punishment, the season ends on an epic note, because a Skrull takes Captain America's place. This opens up endless possibilities for the story. Suddenly, everything Kang was saying makes perfect sense. The destruction wouldn't be Cap's fault, it would be a Skrull disguised as him. Meanwhile, the Fantastic Four return and want to speak with the Avengers. And you know what that means, the classic rivalry between Hulk and the Thing. For those who don't know, their feud is one of the biggest in Marvel history. Hulk loves smashing the Thing because, like Thor, he can actually take the hits without crumbling. But that's not the only rivalry going on. We also get a fun subplot with Iron Man and Mr. Fantastic butting heads. And it's not just about science, it's also about the Invisible Woman. Yep, turns out Reed Richards isn't the only genius interested in her.
Sue Storm is way out of your league, and you're messing it up by ignoring her all the time.
Speaking of Sue Storm, she's been hanging out with Wasp. And guess who shows up? Dr. Doom, the man himself. Because, as he puts it, wherever the Fantastic Four go, Doom follows. This leads to an all-out battle between Hulk and Dr. Doom. Hulk goes all in, trying to neutralize him as fast as possible. At first, Doom dodges his attacks, but eventually Hulk lands a solid hit and takes him down. I love Dr. Doom, but man, what a disappointing defeat. Another villain enters the picture, a monstrous creature that devours any kind of technology. Naturally, it targets Stark Tower. Iron Man and S.H.I.E.L.D. have to team up to stop it. But here's the catch. Tony can't use his suit, or it'll be eaten on the spot. Instead, they take the monster down with pure strategy and teamwork. One interesting moment in this episode, Tony Stark getting closer to the current leader of S.H.I.E.L.D. Could this be the start of a new romance? Nope. She shuts him down immediately. Classic Tony. Back to the main plot. Carol Danvers and her ally are aboard the main ship, which is under S.H.I.E.L.D.'s control. It's Earth's first line of defense in case of an alien invasion. And, well, wouldn't you know it, the Kree arrive, aiming to conquer the planet. At the same time, a group of of Kree, led by the Supreme Accuser, attacks the Avengers. After a grueling battle where the Avengers are this close to losing, Carol Danvers shows up with powers. She officially becomes Ms. Marvel, the name she had before becoming Captain Marvel in the movies. And the big difference between this series and the films? The show actually gives Carol layers and makes her way more charismatic. Now, Ms. Marvel is furious. The Kree betrayed her people before, and now they're betraying humanity. Seriously, this whole situation has more betrayals than my past relationships. With Ms. Marvel stepping up, the Kree demand that the Avengers surrender to avoid further conflict. After all, there's no way Earth's forces can win. The Kree army is just too massive. And, as we all know, humanity doesn't have Ultron as a backup plan anymore, and they already lost control of Kang's ship. Even though some humans are still trying to resist inside the ship, in the end, they capture the Judicator. Captain Marvel is just too powerful, and he was no match for her. So, they decide to imprison him somewhere far away so that he can't give the order for the Kree Armada to attack Earth. And just like that, the problem is solved. After that, 2 humans are hired by Hank Pym to track down whoever stole his suit. Hank hasn't used it in a long time since leaving the Avengers, and now it's in the hands of a thief, Scott Lang, the same one from the movies. He uses his size-changing abilities to steal money, but we find out he's not doing this out of greed or malice. He's trying to save his daughter, who is very sick. Instead of turning to the Mafia to pay for her treatment, he tries to do things his own way. Of course, the Mafia isn't too happy about him quitting, so they use his daughter as leverage. But with Hank Pym's help, Scott manages to rescue her, leading to a surprisingly emotional resolution. Sometime later, Nick Fury makes his return, completely bald. There are 2 possible explanations for this. Either he got audited by the IRS and lost all his hair from stress, or they just changed his design to match the movie version. Either way, it looks great. Nick brings some bad news. The Skrull invasion has already begun. They've infiltrated everything, including the Avengers. Paranoia starts spreading fast because no one can tell who's who. As a result, the Avengers turn against each other, leading to intense fights and serious injuries. Unlike the Kree or Kang, who prefer direct invasions, the Skrulls play the long game. They mess with their enemies' minds, slowly breaking them down along with every major defense system on the planet. Because of this, Tony Stark decides to leave the Avengers, and Captain America takes over as the leader. And as we all know, he's actually an imposter. The Skrulls' next move is to take down the Hulk while he's resting, but before that happens, he's forced to face off against Red Hulk. Unable to win, Hulk ends up being blamed for mass destruction. Captain America promises to prove his innocence. Since fighting the Hulk head-on is almost impossible, the Skrulls take a smarter approach than the Kree. Instead of attacking him directly, they manipulate the situation, forcing Captain America to convince Hulk to turn himself in. At this point, fighting back would only cause more destruction and make things worse for him. With Earth's last major line of defense neutralized, the Skrull Queen decides it's time to launch a full-scale invasion. But where's the real Captain America? He was probably eliminated to cover their tracks, or at least that's what you'd expect. Instead, they chose to keep him alive, locked away on a Skrull ship where they could extract as much information as possible about the Avengers, using it to take them down one by one.
Name: Stephen Rogers. Rank: Captain. Serial number: 5498580.
Since no form of torture worked against the captain, they decide to disguise themselves as his friends, pretending to have come to rescue him. But the captain sees right through their plan and takes them down with ease. The only way to escape this prison is by teaming up with other captives, like Viper, one of Hydra's warriors, and a bunch of other people whose names I can't even remember. So, they join forces to break out. That's also when we learn the tragic origin story of the Skrulls. Their home planet was destroyed by the almighty Galactus, leaving them with no choice but to survive as parasites on other worlds. The Skrulls head to Earth, disguised as the Avengers, to mess with Carol Danvers. They know that during the Kree invasion, she was one of the key reasons for their defeat. Their goal? Trick her into taking them to Wakanda so they can get their hands on vibranium. Luckily, the real Avengers show up, leading to an all-out brawl where no one knows who's who, and that's when we get the big reveal. Thor is actually a Skrull. The Avengers manage to win the fight, but the paranoia is real. Tony Stark is so freaked out by the whole thing that he hasn't taken off his suit in 3 days. Out of nowhere, Dr. Doom shows up and hands Tony a chip that can expose who's a Skrull and who isn't. But before they can use it, Tony and Nick Fury are tracked down by the Skrull Queen. At the same time, she orders the destruction of most Avengers bases, and the strongest Skrulls capture the remaining heroes. To make matters worse, a Skrull disguised as Captain America addresses the people of Earth, telling them to surrender willingly. He claims the Skrulls are a peaceful race bringing love and advanced technology to humanity. The Skrulls believe that by crushing the morale of Earth's defenders, the rest of the world will submit, especially since so many people look up to Captain America. But then, the real Cap, leading the resistance, reveals himself. He takes on his imposter in an intense battle, and with the device from Dr. Doom, they finally expose all the hidden Skrulls across the planet. Even though Captain America has just saved the Earth from the Skrulls, the public turns against him. Thanks to the fake Cap's deception, people now see him as a traitor. In the end, all the Skrulls are placed in stasis and locked away in a space prison. But things go from bad to worse when J. Jonah Jameson does what he always does, turns a hero into a villain. His newspapers plaster Cap's face all over the front page, branding him as one of humanity's greatest threats. And that's when Peter Parker finally enters the picture. This time, it's the ultimate Spider-Man version. Spidey steps up to help Cap clear his name. While fighting some completely irrelevant villains, they end up falling deep underground. Now, Captain America and Spider-Man lead a group of survivors through the sewers, trying to find a way out. As they fight to protect the civilians, the people start to see Cap for who he really is, a hero who would risk his life for them. Bit by bit, he regains their trust. In the end, the Avengers find a way to remove the massive stone trapping them underground, setting everyone free. The Captain delivers an inspiring speech about protecting humanity, even if he never gets the credit he deserves. Because at the end of the day, that's his duty as a hero and a guardian of mankind.
The people you saved know the truth. I know the truth. And the truth always comes out.
And this really resonates with Spider-Man. After all, he's constantly dragged through the mud by the media, despite all his heroic efforts. But seeing the Captain's unwavering resolve gives him a much-needed boost of motivation. Not long after, we get the first appearance of Vision, a highly advanced AI created by Ultron to be his right-hand man. And let's be real, at this point, we're basically watching a real-life Matrix scenario unfold. An AI creating another AI? Sounds like the kind of thing that'll have tech billionaires taking notes. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if this episode ends up being one of those Simpsons moments where they predict the future. Vision heads to Africa to retrieve vibranium, which will be used to build a stronger, more powerful body for Ultron. And yes, the idea of an even more powerful Ultron is terrifying. We've already seen what he can do in his base form. If he levels up, he could become an even bigger threat than the Skrulls or Kang combined. Later on, the Avengers face a major crisis. They lose their powers thanks to a spell cast by the Enchantress. Thor is stripped of his divinity. Captain America reverts back to his scrawny teenage self. And Iron Man, well, he's thrown back to using his very first armor. I mean, let's be honest, his superpower has always been his technology, or, in other words, his money. If Enchantress really wanted to nerf him, maybe she should have just drained his bank account. But hey, I guess we'll never know. What we do know is that now, without their usual abilities, the Avengers will have to rely on strategy to take down this new threat. And that threat, a ridiculously powerful Asgardian weapon called the Annihilator. And of course, it's being controlled by Loki. Our heroes struggle at first, but luckily for them, the spell has a loophole. If they can find the strength within themselves, they can regain their full power. At this point, it's clear the writers were running out of ideas. I think I just figured out why this show got cancelled, but things only get wilder from here. We're introduced to yet another take on the Skrull invasion, except this time Ultron is creating Stark-Tech robots capable of taking down even Captain Marvel, and they're so powerful that Ultron wants to replace the original Avengers with them entirely. For Captain America, being surrounded by so much technology is unsettling. He firmly believes it's making humanity weaker, and when his robotic counterpart attacks him, he barely stands a chance. Meanwhile, Ultron has special plans for Wasp. He sends Vision after her, and here's the twist. Vision still has deep feelings for her. Ultron, on the other hand, wants to transfer Wasp's mind into a robotic body. That's right, our resident evil AI just wants a girlfriend. Can't say I blame him, but, building a robotic version of your crush? That's definitely a bold take on romance. Does this make Ultron the last hopeless romantic? With most of the team trapped in an energy prison, Wasp is not thrilled about Ultron's whole cyborg wife idea. And Vision? He starts to question everything, and so he rebels against Ultron, risking his own life to take down his master. For Vision, the pinnacle of evolution wasn't being a cold, emotionless machine, it was having the heart of a human. In the end, they managed to defeat Ultron, but Vision is badly injured in the battle. Before dying, Vision manages to say his final words to the Avengers, leaving them deeply saddened.
Ultron created me to be perfect, but I believe that means to be more human.
But don't worry, because of course they fix him up and he's ready to die another day. He shows up again later, which might seem like a plot hole, but hey, let's not overthink it. Meanwhile, Hank Pym is falling apart, exhausted from the weight of his own life. And then, he supposedly dies in an experiment. They even hold a funeral for him, gathering several heroes to pay their respects, which officially makes Wasp a widow. So, any guesses on who's making a move? But surprise! It was all part of Hank's plan to fake his death and take on a new identity. He's no longer Ant-Man, he's someone else now. And let's just say this someone else isn't exactly the friendly scientist we once knew. He shifts from a peace-loving hero to an anti-hero who straight up attacks the Avengers. He's completely different from the kind-hearted Hank Pym we remember. He even starts taking out villains, probably driven by guilt over creating Ultron and abandoning Wasp. In the end, everyone tries to talk some sense into him, telling him to come back to who he was. Hank insists that being himself never accomplished anything, only brought pain. If he had been more decisive, more ruthless, he believes he could have taken down Ultron. Then he straight up shoots at Stark. And Stark, yeah, he shoots back. But as the episode unfolds, Wasp manages to get through to him, convincing him to return to who he truly is. Honestly, I don't blame him. I'd probably change for her too. Hank decides to go back to his pacifist ways, but he'll keep his dual identity. He's stepping away from being Ant-Man and embracing a darker persona. Sometime later, Tony decides to repair Vision, and Vision gets a glimpse of the future, where Tony creates an army of robots to fight crime and bring peace to Earth. Which is, exactly what Ultron, the Skrulls, and basically every villain in history have tried to do. At this point, I think the writers are running out of ideas because they're just copy-pasting the same formula over and over. But Vision ends up saving the day when he discovers that Iron Man was actually being controlled by the Purple Man. Everyone nearly loses their minds over this because if someone was able to take over Tony Stark's ridiculously powerful brain, that's a huge problem. Luckily, Captain America, with his signature 6 epic speeches, reassures Tony that as long as he has a good heart, he can resist any mind control. What a wise old... After all this, the next episode kicks off with a mysterious illness spreading across humanity, infecting several Avengers. The US government, terrified of the outbreak, enforces a total quarantine. The Avengers race against time to find a cure. It turns out this virus has been dormant for ages and should have had a cure by now, but instead of just making people sick, it turns them into zombies. And while all of this is happening, Captain America gets captured by the Winter Soldier. Because of course he does. Your old friend Buck, who was your sidekick back in the 40s, is now working for the government as the Secretary of Defense, the very one who declared the pandemic in the city. But then we find out that he's actually the Red Skull, who faked his identity and infiltrated the US government. Classic. Buck, however, betrays him and injects the antidote into Captain America. Furious, Red Skull is about to take Buck out when Cap swoops in, shield in hand, and disarms him. But hold on, he's not out of the game yet. He does what any self-respecting supervillain would do, uses all that sweet taxpayer money to activate a giant killer robot. I can only imagine the government factories casually assembling a death machine with a giant red skull on it, and nobody stopping to say, hey, maybe this isn't standard Department of Health equipment. Buck teams up with Cap to take it down. Cap launches Buck straight at the robot, and Buck gets inside and destroys it from within. Cap knows that. Even though Buck is on the right path now, he still has to answer for his past crimes. But Buck, ever the escape artist, agrees, and then immediately blows himself up again to avoid capture. Still, Cap smiles. He knows his old friend is out there, and that he's not the only one trapped in a time that no longer belongs to him.
10-4, Cap. Bucky out.
Then, in the next episode, who shows up? Red Hulk. He's trying to prove he's not a villain anymore, saving people left and right, giving interviews about how he's changed. He even joins the Avengers and seems to fit in. But of course, Tony Stark isn't buying it. He lets Red Hulk in, but only to keep an eye on him. And honestly, smart move. Meanwhile, Green Hulk is also starting to lose control, and Cap has to tire him out before he goes on a smashing spree. Turns out Bruce Banner has been angrier than usual because Hydra implanted a chip in his brain. So it's up to Wasp to shrink down, infiltrate his head, and disable it. And then, the big reveal, Red Hulk orchestrated this entire mess just to sabotage Green Hulk. Yeah, I really believed he had changed. But then, Thor came in and cleansed my soul with a well-placed hammer strike. What follows is an epic Hulk-on-Hulk showdown. Green Hulk charges in, but Red Hulk lands a punch that sends him flying. And just when you think things can't get any crazier, Tony locks Red Hulk down. Turns out he was already prepared for the inevitable betrayal. He had nanobots hidden in Red Hulk's ID card, and with the press of a button, boom, paralyzed. Which honestly makes me wonder, does Tony have contingency plans for all the Avengers? That would explain why he's so freaked out by the idea of being mind-controlled. because if that ever happened, he'd be the biggest threat to humanity. Then, the final twist, Red Hulk is actually General Ross, Hulk's father-in-law. His entire plan? Frame Hulk to isolate him and destroy his reputation. Hulk, absolutely livid, is ready to smash him into next week. But then, he doesn't. And that restraint? That's growth. Not long after, Kang shows up and throws all the Avengers into different points in time, and he used the Stark generator as a sort of time machine. Before being sent anywhere in time, Tony activates the new Avengers protocol, which is basically his contingency plan, recruiting new heroes to protect Earth in case something happens to the current team. This leads to the formation of a new powerhouse superhero squad, featuring big names like Spider-Man, Wolverine, and War Machine. The rest? Pretty forgettable. In the end, Peter manages to use his brains to reverse Kang's machine and bring all the Avengers back, and together they defeat Kang.
My spider sense. If I'm doing something that'll blow it up, my spider sense will tell me.
Hungry?
Tony, impressed, wants to give Spider-Man his official Avengers card, and with that, the show establishes that the new Avengers are officially part of the team. Moving on, we enter the final arc of the series. The Kree finally decide to invade Earth, fulfilling Kang's vision of total destruction. Turns out, this was all part of the Kree's plan to wipe out Earth's defenses. And here we learn that Earth is actually a strategic point in the galaxy, hence why every major alien race seems to have it on their invasion bucket list. To try and counter this, the Avengers suit up in their special space gear and head off in a ship toward the Kree general. Now this guy, he's insanely powerful. Without missing a beat, he teleports straight to the Kree warship. Meanwhile, Black Panther has been on a research mission near the sun, but something goes wrong with his ship and he starts drifting toward it. This puts Captain America in an impossible situation. Save T'Challa, or stick to the mission and prevent Kang's prophecy from coming true. The weight of the decision crushes Cap. If he saves T'Challa, Earth survives. If he doesn't, Kang's vision will play out exactly as predicted. In the end, despite the pain, Cap makes the call. He lets Black Panther go, and even T'Challa himself agrees that this is the right choice. And just like that, a hero dies, sacrificing himself for the people of Earth. But the Avengers don't have time to grieve. This is just the beginning. When they arrive at the Kree homeworld, they're greeted by an unstoppable fleet. We're talking an armada spanning 100,000 solar systems. Yeah, this time there's no easy way out. Then, plot twist. T'Challa shows up, very much not dead. Turns out he used his ship's teleportation system at the last second. So after all that emotional wait, he just casually reappears like nothing happened. But hey, the dramatic scenes were great, so we'll let it slide. After that, we're introduced to the Kree Supreme Intelligence, the most powerful of them all. This AI connects to every Kree in existence, acting as the ultimate hive mind. And here's the kicker. The Kree, despite their overwhelming power, actually have limited evolutionary potential. Humans, on the other hand, have limitless potential, something the Kree lost eons ago. Captain Marvel tries the diplomatic approach, telling the Kree to leave humanity alone. But of course, that doesn't work, because the Supreme Intelligence has other plans. It intends to use humans as test subjects for experimentation, and things only go downhill from there. To figure out what makes them so different, they're subjected to unspeakable torture. The Avengers don't back down, and Vision takes control of the Krie's intelligence, managing to wipe it out completely. Then, Captain America suggests that Captain Marvel become the new leader of the Kree and guide them toward a better future. And that could have been an epic way to end the series. But of course, they had to hit that 26 episode per season quota. So in the final episode, Galactus sends his herald to Earth to warn that the planet is about to be devoured. But since they only had one episode left, his presence feels underwhelming, to say the least. The Avengers are still trying to process the sheer power of Galactus, but somehow an alliance of Earth's heroes actually manages to put up a fight. And then, Hank Pym just casually defeats Galactus. Because let's be real, explaining that fight properly would have taken way more than 20 minutes. And just when you think it couldn't get any more rushed, Tony Stark sends Galactus to the antimatter dimension, wrapping everything up in record time. And that's how the series ends, after giving us so much entertainment.